Hi everyone, welcome to today's guided watercolor tutorial, Spring's Gentle Stirring. I decided that I wanted to think spring even though it's not really quite here yet. I know it is in other parts of the country and I hope that you all are enjoying it. I did see a few dandelions starting to sprout up through the dirt the other day. So that was definitely a good sign. So today we are going to do this really intuitively. I was inspired by a few of John's butterfly photos that he's taken in the years past. And I just decided to not really use the photo to make it look, I guess, exactly like it or even close to it. But instead just to kind of use the feeling behind the photo that I was able to dig in and kind of extract in a way, but just to let it unfold naturally. So the pencil marks that I made to start were just really loose, and then I kind of tried to darken them up the best I can for you. But it was really more about just trying to like feel into the picture and feel into the message of the butterfly, this idea of transformation and becoming in the spring. So we're going to get started. Of course, all these colors are up for interpretation, and you can make your butterfly whatever color you want. I have drawn 3 in, and then a few different types of wildflowers, and just some grasses, and sort of just having fun with the way that my brush is moving around the page. So I encourage you to make this your own. Maybe there's some flowers that you love that you really want to try to get in there, or a certain type of a butterfly. But here we go. So gather up your paints and your water jug and your brushes, and we'll get started. So I'm just going to start with wet on wet for the butterfly wing, and I decided to go with like a pinkish purple, and these are some pretty simple round shapes that can be altered to kind of make it your own. So just mixing in some of those reds, purples, and going for a soft look. Doing a bit of that outlining and then pulling the paint in, or letting it naturally blend in once the brush is so wet. So that wing in the front will be darker to give the illusion of depth. So we can just think about that as we're kind of moving along here. So just blending with water, not even dipping back into paint right now. Just moving around what's on the page. And then going in and adding some more of that dark color. The paint did start to dry there at that outline, and we want to attempt to create form with color rather than with outlines. Outlines can be flattening. There is a place for them. They can be really cool in certain kinds of art. So if you're going for that, definitely, by all means, outline away. There's really no right or wrong here. So I have a few different palettes. I like to keep some plates of regular additional paint nearby. So in my palette is, when I say regular, I mean just pure honey watercolor. In my palette is a mixture of some Winsor & Newton, the professional grade, and then I've put some honey watercolor on top of them because I will squeeze them out from the tube. So there's some blending going on of those two paints. You can blend watercolor paints, it's fine, but I like to keep some honey just off to the side, kind of more pure. So I have 3 plates that I use with all my other colors on. And I did just purchase a Daniel Smith watercolor, which I've never used before, and it's kind of a deep dark turquoise, and I'm really liking it. And I like the consistency of the paint. And some people have been asking about the paper, so I do use Arches, and I like Arches. It's very expensive. If you're looking for something cheaper that's, I think, really comparable, I began using Legion years ago, but I was using their like a mixed media papers in journals, and this is their cold press that I'm using today, and I'm really liking it. I've done a few different paintings on it, and it's a lot cheaper. It comes in a block, so you have to slice around the sides with the knife. But it's great paper, and when you buy it on a block, you avoid the curling. So that's the purpose of it. Okay, so just continuing to go in, I started with my yellows and kind of those golden oranges on the other butterfly wings. And just remembering to be patient. Sometimes letting it dry a little longer and coming back to it is really helpful. Especially when you're starting to do like more of that detail work, and just seeing, kind of how the paint reacts to the paper that you're using, and different drying times at different stages, the paint moves in different ways. So you may, get to a point where your paint is perfect and ready to move into the next phase of doing something on the same object. And, you've timed it and it was 3 minutes. And then another time, 3 minutes doesn't work. So, it is a bit of trial and error. The more you get familiar with the paints, the easier that becomes. Just continuing the wet on wet here. So adding a bit of a dot of dark Payne's gray to the head area and the body. So just remembering our wet on wet techniques, and that we don't have to pre-mix all our colors, because when your paint is wet and you put it on the wet paper, it instantly bleeds out. And if it's still wet when you're using it, it's again mixing. So if you're looking for a certain shade of green, you don't necessarily need to pre-mix it. You could just experiment with that on your paper. And using some good brushes is really helpful. These are pretty new, and they have a good tip to them, so I can do fine line work. I would suggest, if you decide to take up painting, that you have at least one brush that's good for fine lines and details, a mop brush that's big for washes, and then a medium size brush. You can really get by with all round brushes. It is nice to use some of the flat brushes from time to time. I don't use them as often, but I do keep them on hand just in case. I'm going to start on some of these leaves and plants that I've drawn. Now this brush is interesting. It's kind of got a big mop of a head to it, and then it tapers out into this really nice point. So it's making it a lot easier for me to do this type of work. And I'm just kind of laying in that ochre and green to get that color that you're seeing there. Try not to worry too much about the exact color and trust that my intuition will guide me here. If I have several colors on the plate that I know all mixed together, I will just sort of go with it. So you can't see that plate back there, but it's got greens and blues on it. So ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, viridian green, excuse me. So I know that if I have those colors laid out and then I'm just kind of moving my brush around the palette, collecting paint, it's going to produce a green that will work with my composition and my whatever I'm painting, you know, leaves or flowers, stalks, stems, different types of flora and grasses. And just remembering that your painting really does look so different when it dries. I finished this up a few days ago, and then I went back out to my studio the next day thinking I was going to have to touch it up or add to it, you know, but I didn't have to. I just did it in one shot, and I liked how it came out. I didn't add anything to it. That doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. So this is fun. You can move your brush back and forth in a certain way. So I'm moving my arm up and down, and you can get that look that you're going for with the brush, just kind of with one swipe of color. And it was saturated with color. I didn't even need to go back in. So one thing that you could do before you begin the painting is you could just experiment with mixing some colors on your palette if you're new to painting, and just see what kinds of colors you can get. See what happens when you make the shape of the leaf with just water and then you drip paint into it. These are some of the techniques that are on my watercolor tutorial that was technique based that I did a few weeks ago. But you can kind of just experiment, come up with some colors, see what you make. You can write down notes if you like to do that kind of thing. And that way you might, have a little bit to go on if mixing on the paper is a little bit scary. So again, my pencil lines are just there to guide me. I'm not worrying about if I'm right in the lines. I'm going to erase the pencil lines when I'm done, so they won't be seen anyway. And you don't even really need to do the grass as pencil lines if you don't want to. You could just do the butterflies, depending on what you're going to do for your grasses and flowers. So this is kind of that wet on wet, really showing what can happen, and then just lightly kind of sprinkling that dark green throughout. letting it move naturally with the water and the paint that is already there. So I do move around the page a lot. I don't like to stay in one spot for too long. Usually causes me to overthink, get too tight. So there is a little bit of the wet brush with paint right on the dry paper, and you can see what that is like. It is definitely a little bit more controlled than wet on wet. So I like how that splattered there just by accident. I really like the idea of impermanence and maybe not thinking that everything is so precious. There's a lot in this process of painting that is so much more than the product. And for me, that's always been true. So a little mistake here and a little mistake there. It really just, for me, speaks to the person and their own imperfections. I'm going to add a little bit more color to this butterfly's wings and drop the body down, or the wing down to the body. Now you could keep adding more colors to these wings if you wanted. You could add designs when it dries. Once the paint is dry, you could go back in with more paint and add some designs if you want. Butterfly wings often have some beautiful lines and markings on them, as you know. So that's definitely something that could be added in. I'm going to leave mine more simple. You could also add more grasses. You could fill, more of the space. You could work in a circle. This is kind of already starting to be a circle. So you could actually work in a circle, which would be super beautiful. So just you could use something to guide you to draw a circle, or just draw a light circle and draw everything inside it. I hope that you share these in the comments. You can also email me images, and the chat thread is open for everyone. So feel free to also post images in that. I love to see what you all create. It inspires me. And then my husband and I told you he is the inspiration for this butterfly. And we are now on YouTube with just all of the tutorials together. And it's called Brush and Lens, and I'll link it below so you can see all of the tutorials in one spot. You can also see them all right on Substack. So this is going to dry. I'm going to finish out these bodies, darkening them up. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you all create. And I hope your spring is starting out wonderful. Take care, and I'll see you next time.